are talking a movie simply called Z. Now, this is an American movie, so people call it Z and not Z. And this one is directed by Brandon Christensen, who also co-wrote this, and stars Keegan, Tracy as Beth Parsons. Now, this essentially is a story about a little kid who has this imaginary friend. Now, lots of little kids have imaginary friends. However, this particular imaginary friend called Z seems to be maybe something more malevolent and causes this little lad initially to not being paying attention at school and eventually becoming aggressive, bullying at school, and as the movie goes on, maybe even more dangerous than that. And as the film progresses, we learn more about this Z and maybe what it wants and where it's come from and maybe its bigger plans here. The film essentially evolves around this family. The young boy, of course, his mother, who seems to be the primary caregiver. She is a stay-at-home mum. And then the father, who we see a little less of because he's at work a lot of the time. So let's talk about, first of all, what worked. But first of all, I want to just say a little bit of a tangent here. With the title simply called Z, I can imagine this film really being quite hard to find in search and stuff like this. And I've seen it a couple of times recently, like one called Don't Let Me In, and filmmakers having these very generic titles. And I think this really doesn't do your film any favours. Because it's very hard to find on search results. You've got a lot of kind of results and things like this. So if any filmmakers do watch this, I would say just maybe think about a little bit more creative about naming your film, because this day and age, a lot of it is searched for digitally. And if you have a very generic sounding title, you know, it's going to be hard to find when you're doing search results and stuff like that. Anyway, tangent over. So what works? So I've got to say, I thought the acting was very good here, and I really appreciated the portrayal of this family unit. You know, the father is away at work a lot of the time, but nonetheless, he is at home. He isn't played for this typical sort of like workaholic dad who hasn't got any time for his family. He does seem genuinely involved, and I actually quite like the fact that we have, you know, the father is hiding certain things in regards to his son, if he wants to protect him, as is the mother. So they're not perfect parents, but they're not kind of like necessarily bad parents either. So good kind of like layered character progression, and the performances are all great as well. Beth is the kind of the person who we'll see on screen, the character Beth, and she, you know, she has the kind of the brunt of the acting screen time here, but just does a good job of making a caring mother who is kind of wants to protect her son, but at the same time is maybe a little bit fearful of him. The child actor, I think, does a good job as well, being very cute in scenes and, you know, maybe a little bit more just sort of aloof when he is under the kind of the influence of Z and stuff. We do see kind of flashes of this kind of Z character, and when we do see it, I think it looks pretty good. The design is pretty creepy. I do question where if the child is seeing this character as we see him, they would surely be a little bit freaked out. And you see this in a few times when we have like imaginary friends and things. If it's something clearly horrifying, surely the kid would be horrified by it. But in these films, they never seem to be. So maybe that should be something that I should have said in the negatives there. But let's talk about the negatives. We don't really see a lot of this Z kind of character. I think off the top of my head, we see three fleeting appearances, and that is literally it. We do see some glowing eyes in the dark here and there, and a lot of the time the Z is shown to be somewhat invisible. Now I wonder if that was to try and hide the budget, and I suspect that it might be. But to be honest, I feel viewers may be shortchanged here because we see so little of it, and when we do see it, it's so fleeting. I feel that horror fans may feel a little bit shortchanged. And because this movie is relatively kind of slow-paced, I think they may feel a little bit that they're not really kind of getting their money's worth of horror, if that makes sense, because we do see so little. The movie does do a kind of a good job of having some creepy moments, but so the payoffs aren't quite there, I don't think. And there is when we do see it, or at least on maybe one instance, it's a little bit too kind of CGI, but there is a couple of scenes where I feel it does work. I think maybe the movie wants to try and ask the question: is this all in the the head of our victims? Is this kind of some type of psychosis that is happening with this, maybe a genetic kind of issue with this kind of family? Or is there really some type of paranormal creature that is involved here? And I think the movie thinks that it ends with asking this audience this question, but then we have a scene where someone experiences something that isn't actually genetically involved in the bloodline here, so it kind of answers that. So I don't think the movie is quite as ambiguous as it thinks it is. You know, it's maybe a bit too slow for its own good. We don't really see a lot of kind of like the actual kills. In fact, I don't think we see really anything, to be honest with you. We see a lot of aftermath of what this kind of like this, let's call it a force does to people, even though the body count isn't that high. But again, we don't see it actually happening, and I think that again will kind of maybe a little bit of a frustration for people who at least want to see one on-screen act of violence. There is quite an effective scene where we kind of see a let's just say an accident happen, and it involves this young boy, not the son. But that was very, very well shot, and you could have, even though you don't really see it, you think, oh, that was really kind of quite harsh, and that would have been quite bad. So I think that was actually quite a good shot, actually, quite a good sequence. So overall, I think this movie is fairly well made, but I just don't think it has enough oomph in it for really it to kind of be a particularly well recommended movie. There's just simply there's just not enough meat on the bones here, and I just think it's just a little bit too slow, but it's a story that would have benefited from having a little bit more kind of to it. I think some slow stories, I think, suit that particular narrative. I think this one is slow, but it needed to have a little bit more in there. I think to kind of, it's not, you know, it's not this kind of like story that you could have taken loads and loads of time. The story is relatively simple. So overall, I'll give this one an average score, a 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.